a nobleman, seeking wisdom. Death has taught you well.
Enough philosophy. I seek answers.
Answers indeed. I have them all if you have the questions. And what are the questions for these answers?
After battling Malik, who in his desperation summoned a concussive wave of death that forced us to flee mid-fight, we find ourselves outside his stronghold atop a snowy cliff and remark,
"'Twould seem Malik's destiny with my blade was postponed. Perhaps Ariel could offer further guidance."
With the Bat Beacon just to our east, we take flight once more to the Pillars of Nosgoth to interrogate the fallen Guardian and perhaps learn our next steps.
Ah, the Lord returns empty-handed. Does the Seraphim elude you? Very well, go east of Malak's bastion. The Oracle shall give you aid.
With little recourse but to heed the Guardian's advice, we find ourselves atop the cliff once more. However, a tree bars our path. Utilizing one of our two new axes, we easily lop it down and find a bandit whose limbs could also use a nice lopping. Heading east, we immediately take pause, finding a group of bandits lying in wait, flinging projectiles in our direction. However, we are not without defenses, or should I say, offense. The dual axes are formidable against multiple enemies, as long as Kain is not interrupted. However, he sacrifices defense and the ability to cast spells while using them. Heading east in the next area, we find a sign pointing us towards the Termagant forest. The snow turning into thin, slippery blankets underfoot, and we get a better vantage point of the Oracle's lair.
High upon the face of these cliffs, hidden amongst the complex network of caves, the underground sanctity of the wise Oracle of Nosgoth lay sleeping. Perhaps it was time to brave the winds and seek out this oracle from the vantage point of the heavens.
With naught to guide us but a shining light peeking out of the cliffside, we return once more to our lupine form to begin our scramble up the mountain. But not before a familiar disembodied voice echoes within our skull.
"Oh, little vampire, the game grows interesting. But with so many pawns, can you find the true player?"
Pondering on Mortanius's taunts, we leap across the lake and see to the east a gypsy camp, and to the north an open cave that we cautiously explore. Inside, we find marked on the ground a familiar mural painted, this time denoting the Shrine of Stun. However, as the picture depicts a man being stunned, we quickly discern that this cave is probably full of bandits and re-enter utilizing our disguise spell. Dodging several bandits, we find ourselves in a northern room. It's patrolled by a single sentry, sauntering safely atop his perch. Gathering the stun spell, Kain remarks,
The human mind is a fragile thing. One minor shock properly timed can render them catatonic and ripe for feeding.
With the shrine spell now ours, we attempt to leave via the northern door and find it blocked, and thus we must contend with the sentry. However, as previously suspected, our axes cannot reach him atop his perch. As we're unable to utilize our new stun spell, we have to unequip our axes. Instead of stunning him with our weapon, he is immediately free to feed upon thanks to the stun spell. With our newfound arcane power at our fingertips and our bloodlust sated, we prefer to amble out of the cave, forgoing unnecessary violence in lieu of hunting down the Oracle and answers to the riddle of our true enemy's identity, with Mortanius's taunt plaguing our thoughts. Heading to the east, we then move through the gypsy camp unaccosted. Unlike the previous camp, these tents cannot be entered and therefore should be circumvented. In fact, there's not really anything except a couple of wandering blood bags, and thus we head to the cave just to the east. Inside, more bandits meander about, and the disguise spell really does its job. Should be commended for its ability to hide us in plain sight. Wandering through the cave system, we see the bandits' enemies affixed to the walls, bound to the rock and left to an icy fate. Once outside, we then resume our wolf form and scrabble up a small ledge to the east, and it should be noted that this cave-like system, if it seems familiar, is reminiscent of Zelda 2, which had its own Death Mountain caves in which you had to explore a maze-like structure, and as maddening as it is, this cave also boasts a similar layout. Although it is somewhat easier to figure out where you're going, there is just a lot of unnecessary searching and backtracking. Once outside the cave and heading up to the north, we find ourselves in another blood fountain.
The blood of ages flows so sweet. Come, drink from us. The snow will do you no harm, for our blood preserves.
Now protected from the harmful ice, we can begin our exploration of the cave system anew, searching for the Oracle's lair. In the final cave system, we find no meaningful reprieve from the maze's madness, and wandering through the icy halls, we're then confronted with a disgusting, gelatinous, earth-formed guardian as it hurls its putrid projectiles, and spewing green ichor when hit with our mace. Though they do not fall so easily, attempting to leverage our latest spell, Stun, to no avail. Mentally noting its ineffective nature on the globby matron, we then switch tactics to trusty energy blasts. Later, as we head north through the icy cave network, dodging the now all too familiar traps of arrows flung in our direction and spikes underfoot, we encounter a new enemy, a being afflicted with lycanthropy. However, instead of our own wolf form, they bear a white coat. In a misguided attempt to make peace with our familiar furry friend, we too shift into our wolf form to no avail, but instead remember our latest weapon, the dual axes that heft through its hide as it howls like a charm. We then attempt to break down an ice pillar in front of us with a similar move to no avail, as we only chip at the ice and are forced to switch back to our familiar crushing mace, which shatters the icicle, revealing its contents inside for us to collect. Trudging our way through the cave, we finally find reprieve from the maddening maze with a save point, and exiting the room just to the north, we find ourselves in an unfamiliar, almost museum or trophy room. Examining the contents of the room in a clockwise motion, we first approach what appears to be Malik's fallen armor and remark,
Odd. This armor resembled that of the ward and his minions, yet the steel seemed newly fashioned and untarnished by time. I recognize this crest from my youth. 'Tis the sigil of the mighty lion of Willendorf, blood-stained and rusted upon this battered shield.
Crossing the room past a broken mirror, which makes about as much sense to us as the other items, we see another shield on the wall with a differing crest.
The shield was newly crafted. Its metal shone brightly in the firelight. The crest I did not recognize.
And to the south we find a macabre trophy indeed, as a guillotine, still bloody, stands proudly in the southwestern corner of the room.
A guillotine, its blade still wet with blood.
We finally decide to read the tome sitting atop a pedestal. Hopefully we can gain some insight into the history and origin of these bizarre items.
Hidden amidst the many obscure artifacts in that museum, I discovered an ancient chronicle. This passage caught my eye. It was during these dark times, infested with the plague of the undead, that the Circle brought the Seraphan to existence. Trained to be devoutly loyal to the Circle and the perfect exterminators of the undead scourge, they were led to many victories by the righteous Paladin, Malek, protector of the Pillar of Conflict. They cleansed the vampires with fire, and released their souls to more blessed realms. There is no wrath as terrible as that of the righteous. I'd read enough. At once, disgusted and intrigued, I placed the book back down in that museum.
Learning of the curator's obsession with the Seraphim and their own crusade against our vampiric kin, we head through the northern door and find, perhaps, the owner of said items, the Oracle themselves.
A nobleman, seeking wisdom. Death has taught you well.
Enough philosophy. I seek answers.
Answers indeed. I have them all if you have the questions. And what are the questions for these answers? King Atmar, the only hope to defeat the legions of the Nemesis. King Atmar, paralyzed by his princess's malaise. King Atmar, the useless. Pray, good sir, what are the questions?
A pox upon your tricks and babble, old man. Answer me this. Who is Malik, and how can I defeat him?
All in time, Sirrah. Yes, time. Unless you master it, it will master you. And now it's time for your answer. Malik, defender of the Nine, and last of the Seraphim sorcerer priests. His vanity led to the slaughter of the Circle at the hands of the vampire Vorador. For his failing, his spirit was fused to a hellish set of magical armor. He has allowed no member of the Circle to fall since.
What of this Vorador?
Follow the glow of the Ignis Fatuus to the Termagant Forest.
Ignis Fatuus.
The Ignis Fatuus lights the path to hell, nobleman. Your path. Time, Kain? Next time.
The Oracle leaving us with more questions than when we entered. What they mean, though, we don't know. I guess only time will tell. Maddeningly, we're now led down yet another path. And perhaps to learn how to slay Malik. But also, he mentioned the path to hell. Grim tidings indeed. As we exit out of the cave, we find now a doorway to the east is now open, and a new spell available to us. Collecting it, we find.
Through this magic I can stop my enemies in their tracks. Frozen in time, they can do nothing to hinder their own doom. Sometimes I draw out their fate, for the added fear sweetens their blood.
With our new magic acquired, we exit the cave to the south and find a quite formidable brute minding his business. Unfortunately, we have a new spell to test, and we find the brute indeed is held in place, allowing us to deal with him as we please, savouring his death as he falls back slowly into his inevitable demise. And so our quest begins anew, this time to hunt down Vorador, the vampire, and learn what the Oracle had meant about a path to hell.